It's the Captain Rick Jones coming to you for another edition of From the Bridge. As many of you know, I'm a huge Jimmy Buffett fan, and his breakthrough album was Changes in Latitude, Changes in Attitude. I still have that album both on CD and on vinyl. You may remember that record album also included a little song you might be familiar with called Margaritaville. But the title song was Changes in Latitude, Changes in Attitude. Today's show is all about change, because whether we like it or not, change is inevitable. My guest angler knows a lot about change. Gordon Whitener has reinvented himself and his businesses multiple times in the past and continues to do so. We'll talk a lot about the changes he thinks are coming. I'll also talk about the need for real change on my soapbox. And we'll talk about a place where you can get a whole lot of food for a little bit of change on the road with Rick. In my book, Analog Advice in a Digital World, of Baby Boomers' Words of Wisdom for the Millennial Generation, I wrote this story, and I'm going to actually read from the book this morning. I once watched an interview of a man on his 100th birthday. The young reporter asked the man if he had seen any changes in his lifetime. And he said, "Yes, I have, and I was against every one of them." That response is pretty funny, but it's also pretty pointless. The truth is, when it comes to change, you can fight it, embrace it, or lead it. That's it. Put it another way, there are three types of people in the world: those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who unfortunately say, "What happened?" I choose to make things happen. I choose to change before change changes me. How about you? So our question today is, what do you need to change to make you more effective, more successful, and above all, more fulfilled? It really starts, I think, with self-evaluation. Shakespeare wrote it best. He said, "To thine own self be true." You have to first be very honest with yourself before you can change yourself. Now, I talk to myself a lot, and that may sound weird, but I need to be in touch with me regularly in order to lead, to produce, to sell, and to serve. I have to constantly question myself, motivate myself, lead myself, and make sure I stay true to my value system, because my value system is the foundation for everything I think, I say, and I do. Now, I have this wonderful little formula I like to use about change. The formula goes D plus V plus P is less than the cost of the change. Let's talk about that for a minute. The D says you have to have some dissatisfaction. You don't like where you are. That doesn't mean you're in a bad place, but you know you could be in a better place. And so you're dissatisfied with where you are. Then you add the V, which is vision. Where would you like to go? What would you like to change? You add to that then the P, which is the plan, the process. How do you get from where you are to where you want to be? And all that needs to be less than the cost of the change. And I'm going to tell you a great story about cost of change. I knew a guy who was a lawyer in Atlanta, and he was a very good lawyer. In fact, he had been an all-Southeastern Conference defensive end playing under Coach Vince Dooley at Georgia, and had really a terrific legal career. And but his church, he went to a Presbyterian church in Atlanta, and they asked him to lead the fundraising effort to build a new sanctuary at his church. And so he went through that process, and in that process, raised the money, got the building built. And the day of the dedication, he was just very proud. I mean, he was recognized for what he did, and he was just very proud and fulfilled by that. And he came home that afternoon, and he went out in his backyard and got in his hammock with a notepad, He'd been out there a couple of hours, and his wife came out and said, what are you doing? He said, today was so gratifying, so fulfilling. I just don't think I can go back to being a lawyer. And she said, well, what do you want to do? And Billy Payne said, I want to bring the Olympic Games to Atlanta, Georgia. And he did. He wanted to combine what he loved, sports and community service, and he was able to do that. Now, here's why he could do it. The cost of the change wasn't that great. Atlanta was a big city. It had a big airport. It had lots of hotel rooms. It had lots of sporting venues. And so that was a feasible dream. Now, let's say I get in my hammock this afternoon and I decide I'm going to bring the Olympic Games to Charleston. Well, I'm not. Our airport's not big enough. We don't have enough hotel rooms, and we certainly don't have the infrastructure to be able to run the Olympic Games. But the truth is this, 9 times out of 10, the change we fight are emotional changes. We fight that it won't work here, or I tried that, or you don't understand our industry, blah, 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 blah. And so we have to overcome that. So I ask you again, what do you want to change today? Because all change begins with changing yourself. Let's get back up on that soapbox. In 1963, Sam Cooke, the great soul singer, wrote and recorded a song called A Change Is Going to Come, a song which became an anthem for the civil rights movement in America. And yes, as we've discussed so far today, in every facet of life, change is going to come. But for many Americans, change has not come fast enough or far enough. Our ongoing racial strife leads me to believe that what we've tried to do and continue trying to do simply is not working. We passed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, declaring war on both inequality and poverty. That's nearly 60 years ago. So how's that worked out? Einstein said insanity is doing the same things over and over again, hoping for different results. Maybe it's time for some fresh thinking. And I mean totally fresh thinking, because what we are doing now and have been doing for over half a century is not working. My guest angler today is my buddy Gordon Whitener. Gordon is one of my what I call consiglieres. He's a guy who I seek out for advice and counsel on a regular basis. He's had a brilliant career by reinventing not only himself, but whole industries. Gordon is currently the president of the Whitener Company, which invests in numerous companies. We're going to look at his career and then ask for his opinions about the future, both near and far. Let's welcome my pal, Gordon Whitener, to the bridge. Gordon, it's great to have you today.
Boy, I appreciate it, Rick. So great to catch up with you.
Well, you've had a fascinating career. I've said no one has reinvented both himself and literally industries the way that you have. I know you're a Georgia boy like me. Tell me about where you get started and how your path began.
You know, Rick, I had just a really fortunate couple parents. You know, I grew up in Dalton, Georgia, for the most part. I was born in Chattanooga, and then we quickly moved down to Dalton, where my dad really kind of started his entrepreneurial life, and just so fortunate to grow up with a loving family. Had great brother and sister that were quite a bit older than me, so I'm pretty certain I was a surprise, although my parents never said that. But I was just fantastic. Came up through Dalton Public Schools, had a great athletic programs. Dalton has a long history of tremendous sports, so I was a three sport guy. Played football, baseball, and ran track, and was fortunate enough out of high school to sign a baseball scholarship to University of Tennessee, and came to Tennessee and really played horribly and was terrible, and they unceremoniously cut me. And my real goal at that time, really since I was probably in eighth grade, was to be a college football coach. And so when I got cut from the baseball team, fortunately, Coach Majors and his staff hired me, and I worked my way through college working for them, and just an incredible experience.
Well, Coach Majors recently passed away, and his daddy, Shirley Majors, was an amazing football coach for decades at Swanee at the University of the South. And when I went to Swanee as an assistant basketball coach under Jerry Waters, it was Coach Majors' last year coaching, and he was really, really good to me. So it's interesting how the Majors family intersected both of our lives.
Well, and so many lives. I mean, between all the brothers, in fact, and we'll get to that, but when we shot the movie here in Tennessee with Burt Reynolds, his final film, he came out to see Burt at the set because Joe Majors and he played together at Florida State. And so it's just, when you talk about the Majors, it's just really amazing. And while we're talking about him, literally 2 weeks before he passed, it was his 85th birthday. And I had texted him just to say happy birthday, coach. And he called me like within an hour right back. And he had this, particularly later in life, had this incredible ability to just make you feel good. And he, thanked me for, all these contributions that he said I made to the program, which I didn't feel like I made any of them, but he made me feel good. And he was very good at that. And it was just pretty cool. But
I think people
anyway,
forget what a great player he was.
Oh, he's unreal.
I think he should have won the Heisman Trophy. I think he
Yeah,
finished second,
absolutely.
but there was such a prejudice against the South.
Yeah,
In
Hornet
that
won
era.
it, and Notre Dame that year won 2 games, I think. Majors was in fact, all of them were great players. Bobby was a great player. Joe was a good player. Bill, was a good player and coach who was tragically killed. And when 3 Tennessee coaches were killed when a train hit their car here in Knoxville, and just so, it was an amazing family. Mother and father were unreal. So, but anyway, so I had a great experience here. Got to do and see things that at my age were just amazing. And then of course, when I graduated here, my good friend Kevin Steele had gone to coach at Oklahoma State and a year ahead of me. And when I graduated, he got me an interview there, and they hired me. And so my college football career started, at Oklahoma State. I was initially a graduate assistant football coach, coaching the wide receivers with Houston Nutt. So he was my first, boss other than the head coach out of school, and that was a great experience. Houston's a phenomenal guy and a really tremendous football coach.
Yeah, and another great family. I mean,
unbelievable family, great stories, and four brothers, just like the Majors, and amazing parents who were both deaf, and just a phenomenal story. So just the experiences, I had, and then I got a break when I was at Oklahoma State. I was 22. The recruiting coordinator at Oklahoma State got in some NCAA trouble, and they let him go, and I got promoted, and so I had just at 22 was on a Big 8 full-time staff coaching college football, and was just very, very fortunate, So just and Pat Jones, of course, was our head coach, and we won a bunch of games, and we had Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders, and Mike Gundy was our quarterback. And so it was just a blessed time, and certainly in my life.
Well, you're such a Tennessee fan, obviously, first and foremost, but you also have become, because of your time there, such a big Oklahoma State fan. Did you meet Boone Pickens during that era, or was that later in your career?
I really met him later. At that time, Boone was not really heavily involved certainly in football and all that. He had really started his entry into really athletics was through the golf program and Mike Holder's just unbelievable run as the head golf coach at Oklahoma State. And he got Boone and a bunch of other really great Oklahoma State alumni involved in the golf program. And that was really the front porch for lots of people to come in, that have turned out to be amazing donors to Oklahoma State. That was their entry point, So I met Boone, later, but anyways, get sort of to continue on. So I was, living my life's dream, coaching, at Oklahoma State, and because I'm from Dalton, our athletic director said, "Hey, we need some free carpet, or at least we need a deal. Can you go find us some?" Look, even though I grew up there, I had no idea even where to start, but my search led me to a guy named Charlie Idle, and Charlie, strangely enough, was running a carpet company in Dalton, Georgia, a commercial carpet company, and he was an Oklahoma State graduate. And so, just by happenstance,
there's no happenstance. We know that.
I mean, so I found my way to him, and I called him up on the phone, and I was pretty brash in those days, and I just said, "Here's who I am, and we'd love for you to contribute to the program, blah blah blah." And he said, "Look, I'm going to make a speech to the business school in about a month. Why don't we have breakfast?" So it was right in the middle of the season, and he flew in, and we had breakfast out west of Stillwater, and I put this big pitch on him at breakfast about how he needed to give us free carpet for the athletic department. About halfway through my spiel, he stopped me and he said, "Hey, look, I'm going to give you the carpet, but I want you to come to work for me." And I was like, "Whoa." And I said, and again, I'm a little confident in myself. And I said, "Hey, look, I'm living my life's dream. I appreciate it, but I'm doing what I always wanted to do." And he said, and he's a smart guy. He said, "Hey, look," it was right in the middle of the season. He said, "I bet you haven't been home in a while." He said, "Look, I'll fly you home next weekend. Y'all have an off weekend. Be on my nickel. You tour the plant on Friday. You go to dinner, with me, and no harm, no foul. If you're not interested, but at least you get to see your parents." So, gosh, I was at that time, it was long before the Jimmy sections of the world started helping coaches. So coaches were poor, as you know. So I think at that time I was probably making, 17,000. So a free trip back to home was a definite.
If you were going to go home, not on his nickel, you were going to drive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I did it and visited, and there was something about this guy. It was really, he was really something, and I had a great visit, and I'd always had a little business in me, and so it was like, okay. But I was right in the middle of the season, and I'm recruiting coordinator, so I told him, I said, "Look, I can't even think about this until mid-February,
After
late
signing
February,
date, yeah.
after signing date." And so life went on. I was, doing my thing, and as the season ends, he's still staying in touch with me, and there's something about him, that just keeps drawing me to him, his leadership, characteristics, and right when everything was kind of, the season was coming to a close and recruiting was coming to a close, the recruiting coordinator job at Tennessee comes open, and Philip Fulmer, was an assistant to Coach Majors at the time, and he called me and just said, "Hey,
come home.
We'd love to talk. Well, we'd love to talk to you about it." And then, strangely enough, Larry Marmee, who I'd worked, for at Tennessee under Coach Majors, he had just gotten the head coaching job at Arizona State. He actually came and spent the night with me in Stillwater, and said, "Hey, you might want to think about coming to Arizona State." And so I'm right now, I'm at this point, I'm 23, and just like, I'm looking at 3 different opportunities in college football, but there's this thing sitting out there with this guy, Charlie Idle. I mean, there's just something about this guy. And so I was so torn, and I felt like, look, I can't even if Tennessee offered me something, I don't know that, I could leave Pat Jones at Oklahoma State, who took a chance on me when I was 22. Do I want to do that? So to make a very long story short, I labored over the decision, and finally it just said, you know what, I'm gonna go follow this guy, Charlie Idle, and it ended up being just a tremendous decision for me. Charlie and I were together for 12 years, two different companies. I started out in sales and worked my way up to sort of his number two, and the first 6 years we were at a company called Collins and Aikman, which was just a dramatic turnaround. And I, like I said, worked myself up to sort of his number two guy. And then we got hired away by a company called Interface. And for the next 6 years, we turned that company around. And the last 5 of that, I led a group of called Interface America, which is, a very large company, 750 million or so, 4,000 employees. And we had a historic run there. And it was phenomenal. And then I learned a real valuable lesson. Charlie and the chairman founder kind of got into it over the future of the company, and he and Charlie split ways. And so here's a guy that I sort of based my whole career around, and he's gone. And so I agreed to stay for about 5 months with, in a transition, because I knew this guy was going to want, he knew I was tied to Charlie and knew he was going to want his own thing. They were great to me, and I stayed. And in literally December of 99, I sort of decided with them that I was done, with corporate America for a while, and literally had no idea, what in the world I was going to do. And so I'm sitting in, at that time, Cartersville, Georgia. Susie and I just built our dream home on a ranch in Rockmart, Georgia. And so I'm sitting there, and some guys came to me and said, this rodeo association's going broke. And if you just take over some of the bills, you can just, if you had some interest. And I'd always had a real love of the West and been infatuated with cowboys and the whole thing, John Wayne. And so I said, yeah, let's do it. And so that company just turned 20 years old. We started a company called United States Cowboy back then. And as you know some of the guys that run it for me. And
yep.
We've had a really great run in rodeo and just the Western marketing and media, and, been tremendous. And so that was, at that point was obviously a wild left turn, because here I was literally a CEO of a very large company in a public company. And then I literally walked across the street where I was going to Staples and buying my own paper and pens. And, it was a bit of a crazy gut check. So
I'm such a rodeo fan. It is such a quintessential American institution. I mean, the pageantry, the athleticism, the coordination. I mean, rodeo is in my opinion, it's everything good about America.
Well, the one thing I found several things, in our time there. It's one is you just have salt of the earth people that are just. I mean, look, you've always got outliers, but by and large, just phenomenal salt of the earth people, and honest and hardworking and driven. But I think the thing that really struck me the most is how they pulled for each other, even when they were competing against each other. It's amazing that you'll see a barrel race and they're sharing a barrel horse, or a calf roping event and they're sharing another guy's horse, and who could beat him, and he's letting him use his horse, but that was just, it's pervasive throughout the sport and throughout the West. And I think it goes back to, helping, with barn raisings, or helping, somebody fix their fence, or sharing vegetables from the garden. It just, I think and we'll get back to this later in the talk, but it's a part of America that I believe is making a very rapid comeback, and it'll be interesting to see. But to sort of to carry on, so I'm doing this, which doesn't take a ton of my time at the time, and I had some people helping me, and so I was looking around for kind of what was next, and I met the parent company at the time of Host Communications, and basically when I met them, they explained to me the company, was in some trouble, had just lost, $6.5 million of EBITDA, and then also lost an NCAA contract, big one. And would I be interested in, moving to Lexington and trying to turn it around? And I I just built this amazing home on our dream place, but something, just something was inside me, said, let's, I'd always kind of dreamed about sports and business, even when those dozen years I was in the carpet industry. So we did it. So Susie and I commuted about 10 months, which was brutal. And then we moved the family to Lexington. And basically I started in October of 2002 there, and I think the family moved up sometime in 2003. And it was a really great experience, Rick. Had met a lot of incredible people, had a very solid top team. I mean, it was so interesting because when we'd gone through a couple of turnarounds in the carpet industry, we really had wiped out a lot of people and brought in our own team. And but when I went to Host, I'd sort of made up my mind that I really wanted to work with who was there. So I hardly brought anybody new in, very few, and just tried to make it work with everybody that was there. And it was a great experience. We had a lot of fun, and it worked hard, and it was difficult because of the situation the company was in. But I was very proud of the work we did there, and really in the summer of 2005, we came to a very difficult decision, and the company still has had some rough roads ahead, and we had really two main businesses. One was obviously the media rights business for colleges, which was challenging, and then we had the event business. So we owned the NBA Hoop It Up and Got Milk 3-on-3 and some of those, and I felt like that was a strong part of the future of the company because we owned those events
versus the rental business
versus renting the college rights. And to make a very long story short, basically the board and I did not agree, and there were some things that were going on that I wasn't aware of capital wise with the owners of the company, and so they basically we parted ways in the summer of 2005. And as you know, right on the heels of that, I'd been looking at Action Sports Media, which Paul Allen owned, as a potential add-on to Host. And when I left Host, I very briefly tried to put a private equity deal together to buy Host to relieve these guys in Atlanta of all their financial stuff and put it behind them. But they decided to spin out another company of theirs and bolt it on to Host, and so it could sort of prop it up. And Tom Stoltz came in and did a tremendous job, and he and I really have become great friends as a result of it. And so it was a good thing for Host, and honestly, it was a good thing for me because we left and I took some of my team with me, and we bought Action Sports Media from Paul Allen, as I said, and we owned jumbotrons all throughout the nation, college football stadiums and some basketball stadiums. It was a great business. The company had great contracts, and we were very fortunate. In about 28 months, we flipped the company to Learfield and ISP at the time to Greg Brown and Ben Sutton. in a joint venture. They came together and bought the company, and our investors had a big win, and management did okay. And so it was, it was just a great, part of our career, and sort of a nice cherry on top for the college sports business at the time. And so,
I find that a lot of times leaders don't know when to pull the trigger. They don't know, hey, this is the best thing for us and our shareholders. Sell the thing. I've watched people hang on, maybe out of ego or pride or a lot of other things, when the market says you're better off turning this thing loose. And you were smart enough to see that. Let me ask you this.
it was one of the hardest decisions, Rick, because
I'm sure because it was doing great.
We were doing great, and we, I was making good money, and so for me personally, it probably wasn't the best decision, but for my investors, it was absolutely the right decision, and it actually paid back for me later, because those investors said kind words to people down the road that helped my career later. But you were going to ask.
I was going to ask you. I had an agency. We've been friends for a long time. I had an agency that Host owned part of, and then we ended up selling it to a British publicly traded company, and I ended up getting fired. And I learned more from that experience than maybe all the successes that I've had. What were some of the key learnings coming out of Host that you took and said, hey, I'm going to take this, and I'm not going to make this mistake again, or I'm going to do this or do that? Talk a little bit about that.
I'd say I even back before Host, I'd had a number of those experiences. When you go through turnarounds, I say this to young people all the time. You really never learn anything in business when things are going well. You sort of think you're feeling good about yourself. Things are rocking and rolling. So you don't learn a lot. You learn when crap hits the fan. And so we had plenty of that at Collins and Aikman, at Interface, and certainly at Host. I mean, one of my, I can tell you that, I've worked for now a couple of founder chairmen, and those are challenging. You got to have a really unique mindset in those situations, because those people, the company is a lot like a child to them, and and anything you do or say negative about it has just a really tough impact on them. And so, going back, certainly could have been more sensitive to that. That's, that would be one takeaway. In the college rights business, you and I, have had, lots of conversation about this. And I was about 20 years wrong. But if you go back and, somewhere there's a USA Today article that's still out there where I kind of said that the rights fees will become prohibitive, and I thought it would be, 10 years, and it took 15 or, 17, I think, from when that article was published, because a lot of people made a lot of money in the interim. But, I think.
But you were right. I mean, you're kind about the way you say it. I'm calling it cocaine. I'm calling it institutional cocaine. They've gotten so used to that they're addicted to it, and it's just it's a house of cards.
Really.
Both sides. I agree.
The giver and the taker were, and so, so I really learned at that point it's better, if you can, to own things and own your own destiny, but look, it's been a tremendous business that, like I said, made a lot of people a lot of money. So it's, there's nothing I have to say negative about it. I learned that it's, you talked about my crazy career. I laughed when I did an interview like this similar years ago. I said, the bottom line is my mother said I could do anything, and I believed her. And it's really true. The other thing she said, which over and over, is always look for the good first in people. And so when I went to Host, as I said, I decided that I wasn't going to to overhaul the team. I was going to work with whoever was there and just, try to be a coach. And I really probably enjoyed that as much as anything really that I've ever done. I mean, working with those people through that time, those difficulties really made it special for me. And so I'm a glass half full, as you know, kind of guy. And it was a great experience, even though it didn't end, the way I had hoped or even wanted it to. It was a great experience.
Well, Faulkner once said the past isn't dead; it even isn't past.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we've written the last chapter of the multimedia rights business and all that, and your engagement with that. I still think there's some things ahead. I like the fact that there were people at Host that you work with that you later brought along with some other ventures. One of the most creative things that I've seen anybody do that y'all did was the Wrangler Network. Talk about that. That is such a breakthrough concept.
Well,
Again, you might be 10 years early.
so we were certainly early, but one of in our 20-year history in the rodeo business, we've done really everything. We started out, as putting on our own rodeos and being our own sanctioning body throughout the Southeast. And so we did all kind of crazy things. And we intersected with your company back then as we were putting on rodeos at NASCAR races, which my wife would say was wildly expensive, and she'd be right. But it was also a way. It was really kind of our first, and certainly my first chance to make a name for ourselves in sports. And as time went on, we've done everything in this particular business from running, putting our own on our rodeos, running the media for the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association, running their Extreme Bulls tour, just, all kind of things. And it really became to a point where television was not sustainable for rodeo, in our opinion, at the time. And this is about 6 years ago when we came to this conclusion. We were, the production costs were high. There was no more rights fees because the big sports had sucked them up. And we made the decision at the time, and we watched Wrangler over on, every time rodeo got in trouble, they ran to Wrangler, and Wrangler was getting, tired of that. And so we just sat around in sort of a planning mindset. And again, as you pointed out, a lot of these guys had come with me from my time at Host. And, this is many years later. And we remembered, all the high school games that we had streamed in those days at Host under the iHigh banner. And so, another concept way ahead of its time was iHigh. And so Tim Campbell, who was there, is the foremost expert, and he had his own company, 6 years ago when we started this discussion. And of course, Sam Dunn, who's been with me, for 20 years, was at Host with us. So we all knew each other very well. And so we just sat around and said, what if we took, the live stream video inside of an arena, because we'd worked in every one of these arenas running the Extreme Bulls tour. So we knew it like the back of our hand. Plus we had the Action Sports video board history. And so it made sense. We said, what if we took this video feed and the audio feed and married them together and live streamed it, just took it straight over the internet. And we said, that's doable. And we said, now we need, how do we fund it? And so we went to Wrangler and we said, look, we're going to create your own branded network called the Wrangler Network. And we launched it 6 years ago, and it had a great start, but last year it had 58 million views, and it's a real force in the industry. And I got to give my team and Wrangler both credit for really coming up with something that was very unique and is still unique today. But 60% of the people watch it on their phone, it's a juggernaut in short form content. It's just been a very successful venture.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about about the fact that I've said repeatedly that I think a lot of the marketing communication industry that tends to be very coastally biased, very New York, LA biased, really doesn't understand heartland consumers. And when you don't understand heartland consumers, then you certainly don't understand something like rodeo. You know, the rodeo is one of the places that they still pray before an event, and they make a big deal, an appropriately big deal, of the flag ceremony, and they, you know, it's about family and faith and flag and patriotism and all those kinds of things. And I think a lot of people don't seem to understand that. Talk a little bit about that and what you think is going to happen with Heartland activities.
But certainly one of the things that has always drawn me to rodeo and the Western way of life is patriotism, love of God and country. And I said it earlier, just really great people that care about each other and want and truly want each other to do well. There's no I win, you lose, for the most part mentality. It's let's see how we can all win together. And I think that goes back to the very beginnings of the United States of America, and I'm all about it. And I think, even though we're in tumultuous, and I mean crazy tumultuous times, I do believe this coronavirus is going to serve an interesting purpose for a resurgence in rural America. I'm seeing it. As you well know, I've got Susie and I have a small ranch south of Knoxville where we live. We don't live on the ranch, but we're looking hard at it now because of all that's happened. And I think this rush to downtown and living in cramped quarters, I think is going to see a bit of a reversal. I think people have I think have enjoyed for the most part and getting to know their families again, not traveling as much. And while you and I have missed travel because we happen to be two people that enjoy getting out and seeing people and communicating, but we've also talked about it, and we've enjoyed the peace of being home and getting to really getting to see things and be with our families like we haven't before. So I think we're going to see a drastic change in that.
We did a recent show on focused on the outdoors, and we've seen hunting and fishing licenses go through the roof. We're seeing more people buy tents and RVs, and I really do believe you're going to see. I think it woke a lot of people up. I think it woke a lot of young people up that said, this is crazy.
I think you're going to see people grow their own food. You're going to see people pay very close attention to, to what they spend their money on. I think it's a revolutionary time in many ways, not just for the election and things like that. I mean, just down to the how am I going to live my life revolution is going to be very, very different. I mean, and look, I have 5 children. You've got children that are you and I have similar ages, and that's they're going to control the world going forward. You and I are obviously not.
Elvis has left the building.
and so I think they're just not going to do some of the things that we did, and I think that'll be for the better. I mean, we made sacrifices that we felt we needed to make, and I think it's had certain effects that haven't always been great, and so I've been through a divorce 20 something years ago, and that was painful, and so I think you're going to see a difference, and I'm all for it, and so our company now is so when I left, when I sort of did the final thing when we sold Action Sports Media, I decided then really to be when we sort of restarted the Whitener company in 2009. We became a consulting and investing company basically, and so we're invested in at any given time 8 to 10 businesses and that are all sort of related to things we've done in the past. And then I spend a lot of my time helping, trying to help sort of C-level executives with their companies or high net worth individuals like Boone was for us with things that he had spent his money on. But I think,
I mean, if you think about it, you've come full circle. You wanted to be a coach. That's what you're doing now. I mean, you're coaching. You're coaching businesses and executives and key people into, how to maximize what they do. You mentioned Boone Pickens. We talked about him earlier. Boy, you talk about a larger than life character. I mean, the American dream probably, if you looked in the dictionary and looked under the term American dream, it would probably say C. Boone Pickens. Tell me about your relationship with him, what he meant to you.
It was, gosh, it's hard for me to talk about it without getting emotional. He was such an impact. He had such an impact on my life and my family. Again, I got to thank Mike Holder at Oklahoma State for really putting us together. When I sold Action Sports Media, I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to just kind of keep it small, do my own thing. So I called Boone, who I met, numerous times and been with numerous times around, everything from football to golf to politics, whatever. So I went down to see him and he said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm not really sure. And he said, well, look, I invested in about half a dozen businesses that I have no idea what they are or why I did it. Would you just caretake them? And so we had, 10 good years of just working really throughout all the different companies that he was invested in or owned a piece of, and just being part of his leadership team, which was just amazing. Boone, was the ultimate entrepreneur. He started out at Phillips Petroleum and just could not get comfortable with the corporate lifestyle, and kind of where I got at a certain point at the end of my time.
Y'all are both cowboys
at Interface. And he just, he went out and started his own gig in the oil business and grew it into just an unbelievable empire. And look, and he sort of got sideways at one point with the company he built and shareholders and board. And so he left and started his own thing again, really late, older than you and I are. And in fact, he made more money in his life after 70 than he made his whole career, which is hope for us all that are old. But he, my biggest takeaways from being around him for so long was, one, he was unbelievably generous. There are hospitals all throughout Texas that, really wouldn't be in the shape they're in without Boone Pickens. I mean, there's a $50 million cancer building at MD Anderson in his name, UT Southwest Medical Center, Baylor Hospital. He gave away $1 billion. $1 billion, gave it away. That's the kind of guy he was. But even down to, I tell people all the time, and I've dealt with, the poorest of people and the wealthiest of people, and sometimes as the wealthiest of people forget where they came from. Boone was not that guy. In fact, one of the things I love to tell is that, every Friday Boone left and went to his ranch up in the panhandle of Texas. And it was a remarkable place. And he flew his plane up there every Friday and came back, Sunday or Monday. And I can tell you that not just me, but many people who, if you were ever around that office on a Thursday or a Friday, he would say, "Why don't you come to the ranch this weekend?" And I mean, he meant it. And he would, and if you wanted to do it, he would take you. And there's so many people that just don't get that. They wouldn't invite people because they were, not of their class or whatever. This guy was so inclusive, so amazing, just so generous. That's the best thing I can. Now, obviously, he was driven. He was very smart. a tremendous optimist, but when it comes down to the core of him, he was a generous guy that really did care about people.
Well, it's interesting. We've got a lot of people today that are questioning capitalism. Uh, and he was the best of capitalism.
No doubt.
You can't give $1 billion away unless you make more than $1 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, the key is, I always say this: compassion. Capitalism without compassion, or in my case, I say capitalism without Christ, it can be a sin. But he walked the talk. I mean, he
did.
He did. I mean, every day, and was pretty special. We got just a few more minutes. I want you to look in the crystal ball. Here we're here in July with and still in the middle of this coronavirus thing. We don't know what's going to happen, but look and tell me what you think is going to happen, especially in college athletics.
Well, I know that economically there's tremendous pressure for all colleges to have, the big colleges to have college football, and to have school. I mean, I've still got 2 in college, and those schools. My youngest is at Wofford, and my middle daughter's at Tennessee, and they both schools really want kids on campus, and certainly want football to happen. I think not only economically but psychologically. And I know, and I'm proud of particularly this. The conference commissioners have by and large bitten their tongue and not tried to be, have too many, I guess, predictions. Because time is our friend in this situation, just to see what happens. So I believe we will have college football. I believe that they will do their best to have as many fans in the stand as is safe. I certainly think you're going to see, mask around for a long time, sanitizer around for a long time. I mean, even if, Rick, if a vaccine was created tomorrow, there are many people that won't take it. They're afraid of vaccines. And so even though we might get one, I think we're going to be dealing with this particular thing for a while. And the truth is, we're not going to know really about this virus for years. Why does it affect one person, not another? So I think we're just going to have to go forward in a very cautious and ambitious way, and hopefully have a very strong and profitable college football season, because it's very important to the fabric of the country, and economically it's an engine that I'm not sure we can do without. I'm certain that colleges can't do without. Our athletic departments for sure can't do without. Colleges also would be some of them would be in trouble without it. So that's my predictions. We'll have it. It'll be very closely monitored. There are a lot of smart people out there trying to do the right thing to make it as safe as possible, and that's what I think we're looking at.
Well, we got a lot more we could talk about, and we're a little bit out of time today, but I want to get you back in the fall. At that point, we'll know where we are, and then we can I want to talk next time about some long-term predictions, both about the country and about the state of college sports and about the state of marketing and capitalism in general, because I think these are important things. I will say this: college football can bring us back together like nothing else, and if no other reason, I want it to come back in a big way. So, listen, pal, I can't thank you enough for being with me today.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you, and good luck to you, and I'll see you soon.
All right, thanks, buddy. On today's segment of On the Road with Rick, I'm going to break from tradition and actually talk about a chain restaurant, a place where a little bit of change can get you a lot of food. And this one is actually in trouble, having recently filed for bankruptcy protection. I'm talking about my all-time go-to road food classic, the Crystal. What can I say? I love Crystal hamburgers, usually by the sackful. I have a very long relationship with Crystals. My mom would shop at the Kroger in Belvedere Plaza in Southeast Atlanta, and we'd get to eat Crystals on grocery day on Saturday. That was such a treat to be able. We didn't eat out much when I was a kid, but we would get Crystals on a Saturday. Later, when I was a college basketball coach at Sewanee, I knew virtually every Crystal location between Atlanta and Monteagle Mountain. Most were open late night, and some were even open 24 hours. It's really easy to drive and eat those 2-bite hamburgers. You can hold one in one hand and hold the steering wheel in the other. I also like their chili pups and their corn pups, but mostly I love those Crystal hamburgers. I hope the Crystal can stay alive because I'd sure miss them on the road with Rick. That's today's show. I hope to see you back with us next week from the bridge.